General nature thereof? Seeing none, may I please have a motion to approve the agenda has been circulated. Councillor Gartner, thank you. Second, Councillor Kim. Comments or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Planning applications. We're dealing with 3 planning applications this evening. Welcome to Aurora's public planning meeting. The purpose of this public meeting is to inform the public and obtain public input regarding a proposed temporary use zoning bylaw amendment, a draft plan of subdivision, official plan amendments, and zoning bylaw amendments. No decision will be made tonight on any of the applications. For each planning application that will be considered by Council tonight, the following process will occur. Town staff will outline the purpose of the planning applications being considered. The applicant will then be given an opportunity to make a presentation and address issues which have been raised by staff, in the staff report or public concerns already filed. Following the presentations, members of the public will be invited to offer their comments with respect to the applications, and then finally, Council will be given an opportunity to question the proponents. Staff or the applicant will answer questions as appropriate. Once we've heard from members of the public, it will be open to members of the Council. It should be noted that a comprehensive report will be prepared and presented to a future General Committee meeting assessing the merits of the application before us and providing Council with a recommendation for consideration. It's very important that the town receive the correct name and addresses of individuals having an interest in the planning applications. Therefore, if you plan to speak to Council this meeting, or if you wish to be notified of any further Council or committee meetings concerning the application being considered, you must complete one of the green interested party forms that Linda is holding up, and please return it to Linda before you leave this evening. Under the Planning Act, the applicant or residents have the right to appeal any decision of Council on a planning application to the Ontario Municipal Board, but you must verbally express any comments or concerns here tonight, or submitted comments and concerns in writing to the town prior to Council adopting an amendment. The Ontario Municipal Board may dismiss all or part of an appeal made in respect of an application. The public meeting is being audio and video recorded. Your name, address, comments, and any other personal information are being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. This will help our town clerk prepare accurate minutes and to create a record that is available to the general public, including the town's website. Questions about this collection should be addressed to the town clerk, Town of Aurora. I will now ask the Deputy Clerk to confirm that notification to the public has occurred as required by the Planning Act. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to item 1, application for temporary use zoning bylaw amendment, 455 Magna Drive, Inc., part lots 19 and 20, concession 2, EYS, formerly Whitchurch, related file number SP EX 2016-06, file number ZBA 2016-04. On June 9, 2016, a notice of public planning meeting was published in the Auroran and Aurora Banner newspapers and given by mail to all addressed property owners within a minimum of 120 meters of the subject lands. A notice of public planning meeting sign was also posted on the subject lands. Respecting item 2, application for draft plan of subdivision, official plan amendment, and zoning bylaw amendment, Leslie Wellington Developments, Inc., 1289 Wellington Street East, file numbers SUB-2016-01, OPA-2016-01, and ZBA-20603. On June 9, 2016, a notice of public planning meeting was published in the Aurora and Aurora Banner newspapers and given by mail to all addressed property owners within a minimum of 120 meters of the subject lands. A notice of the public planning meeting sign was also posted on the subject lands. Lastly, with respect to item 3, applications for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, Metropolitan Square, Inc., 180, 190, and 220 Wellington Street East, file numbers OPA-2015-05 and ZBA-2015-15. A notice of second public planning meeting was given by mail to all interested parties. Public meeting notification for each item has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I will now ask the Director of Planning and Development Services to begin with the presentations. Mr. Riddle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lawrence Cook, our planner, is handling all 3 items this evening, and the planning consultant for item 1 is here, Mr. Templar Santronichich. I hope I got that right. And Angela Scaveris is the planning consultant for item 2 and 3. Lawrence?
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Planning staff would like to provide you an overview of tonight's application on 455 Magna Drive for a temporary zoning bylaw amendment. The temporary use zoning bylaw amendment is to exempt the proposed butcher shop from the zoning bylaw for a temporary period of 3 years. As shown on this map, the subject lands are located on Magna Drive, highlighted in red. Please note that Magna Drive is a private road. It's just south of Wellington Street East, just east of Stronach Boulevard, and is highlighted in red. The existing tenants within the buildings include Magna International, Stronach Group, and the Bionics Bicycle Company. A brief background of Section 39 in regards to temporary use bylaw. Councils are permitted to pass by temporary use of land, building, or structure under Section 34 of the Planning Act. The temporary use bylaw will define a specified area and which shall not exceed 3 years from the day of passing of the bylaw. After the initial 3 years, the applicants will have to request get permission from council for additional 3 years. And if approved, if refused, actually, the applicant will have to restore the area back to the original state. And if this bylaw gets approved by council, the temporary use will require enactment by council. So similar to all other Planning Act applications, the proposed temporary use bylaw are subject to other provincial, regional, and municipal policies as listed here. Currently, the official plan designates the land as business park. To give a brief explanation, the business park designation also permits uses under the mixed-use designation. Under the mixed-use designation, community commercial uses are permitted, in which the food store, similar to the proposed butcher shop, is listed as a permitted use under community commercial. The existing vacant lands adjacent to the subject lands to the north is designated mixed use. Further to Section 352 of the official plan, the applicant is required to submit a comprehensive development plan on the mixed-use designation. As shown here, the proposed butcher shop is located temporary on Magna Drive with the red dot, as the applicant continues to work on the details of the mixed-use block. The existing zoning on the subject land is zoned RU6. The existing zoning reflects the uses there today, which are mainly manufacturing, assembly, warehousing. The proposal here is to keep the existing RU zone, but however, to amend the list of permitted use to add food processing establishment for a period of 3 years. So a little description of the proposed temporary use. The proposed butcher shop will only consist of areas of preparations, retail, and storage. No live animals will be brought on site as part of the food preparation. A new vehicular access will be off of Magna Drive with 8 parking spaces. And the existing loading areas to the south of the main building will continue to be utilized. Here's the proposed site plan of the butcher shop. As you can see, that it's only contained within a small unit within the existing main building with a number of parking spaces in front off of Magna Drive. The proposed elevation continues to use the consistent architectural elevation as you see today. There really is no deviations from the existing architecture. The application has been circulated, and planning staff will continue to work with the applicant to discuss the official plan and zoning bylaw appropriateness and the compatibility. However, staff have received some initial comments back from internal and external agencies, such as the Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority, York Region, Fire Services, and the development engineer and the Park Services has no further comments on this application. To conclude, after tonight, staff will take a technical review and provide a comprehensive report with the recommendation back for council's consideration at a future general committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. Kepler.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. My name is Templar Sang Trinaistich. You can call me Templar for ease. Works just fine. I won't take up too much time. I think the presentation was fairly complete. Certainly here to answer any questions that you might have. It's interesting that most people's experience of buying meat from a butcher shop nowadays is really wrapped in cellophane at a grocery store, and this will be a slightly unique and different experience of a more traditional type butcher shop that will, I think, be as unique as most of the other Stronach Group type developments that you see in the area. So we're really quite interested and excited to see where this is going. It is a temporary use for the main purpose of the lands essentially to the north along Magna Drive on either side of Stronach Boulevard all the way out to Bayview are part of a future, what we're looking at, starting a master plan process to better plan out that area. And we certainly anticipate that this use, while temporary nature, would likely be relocated somewhere within that future development. And we'll be coming forward with more detailed information of that master plan process likely later this year or early next year too. So stay tuned on that. But for the meanwhile, Mr. Stronach and the Stronach Group are certainly eager and excited to get started on this butcher shop. There are some interior renovations to occur. Right now, the space is currently used as a test kitchen itself. So there's not a whole lot of work to do on the interior other than reorganizing some space, introducing a retail counter, and punching out a new door with proper windows for the actual retail entrance. And there's a little bit of extra facade work that needs to be done just to accommodate the emergency access and entrances for the storage areas that are on either side of it. But for the most part, if you were to drive along Wellington, just because of the berm and the elevation and the visual lines, you actually probably won't see much of this facility or this retail store as you pass by on Wellington. It'll be a destination point to have to come down Stronach Boulevard onto Magna Drive to come to this site. So that's essentially the summary I really just wanted to relay tonight. And if you have any questions, happy to answer any of them.
Thank you very much, Templar. I'll first see if there's any members of the public who have any comments, and if not, are there any members of the public who would like to comment on this particular application? In that case, I'll open it up to members of council. Questions for the proponent, please, with respect to the presentation. Councillors Gartner and Thompson. Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Is this butcher shop going to be open to the public, or is this for use only for those who are beyond the security gate?
The intention is clearly for the public. I hope to be one of the first customers.
Thank you. Can you just tell me what master plan process you're talking about?
Sure. So the Stronach Group owns the balance of the lands essentially on the south side of Wellington, stretching all the way from the gated community of Dina Meadows all the way over to Bayview. So those lands are already designated as part of the Aurora 2B secondary plan as mixed-use community, commercial, and business park. So the idea is before we come in with actual applications for any future development plans, we'd like to get a better sense and comments and feedback from council as well as Stronach's input in terms of what we'd like to see actually happen there. So it's just more of an early engagement before we actually just submit applications in the future to be a bit more consultative.
Thank you. Last question. So this is really, this is site-specific zoning here, and I would expect usually an applicant would come in to ask for a zoning change. So why haven't you done that in this case?
Well, temporary use bylaws are a little unique in the sense that a traditional rezoning under Section 34 of the Planning Act is when the applicant has a longer-term vision that wants to zone the lands for that use because they envision them as continuing for a longer period of time. The temporary use approach is a softer, shorter-term approach without redesignating the lands from what they are now, which is an RU zone which permit the business and office types uses, as opposed to redesignating that to a community commercial use, which could have conflicts in their future use of that facility on the go forward. So the temporary nature of it will allow them to operate the facility while we get started on this process, while you start to see activity on the south side of Wellington before that use ultimately moves somewhere else.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson?
My question was answered. It was similar to why the temporary designation.
Sure. Councillor Kim?
My question was answered too.
Councillor Abel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So,
Templar is the first name, yeah.
Templar?
Templar is my first name.
Templar, like in Simon Templar.
Exactly.
Thank you. Templar, your role with the Stronach Group? Obviously, you're in some sort of planning capacity?
Yeah, I should have made an introduction first. I work with Delta Urban Inc. I'm the managing director there. I'm a planner by education, but we're the development advisors for the Stronach Group.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I know that the beef is of interest to Mr. Stronach. Is this part of his new venture? I think, I'm not going to say he has many, but I have understood that he's breeding and is looking at getting into the beef purveyor business. Is this him basically launching in our area?
Exactly. So he is looking at, he essentially is one of the largest landowners in the Florida area, essentially. And I was looking at a plan the other day. He's got 32 square miles of agricultural pivots where he's raising these cattle. And he has the aspiration of bringing that beef to market, not just for his own personal use and consumption at local restaurants that he owns, but to a broader public market as well. So depending on how well this does and how much more interest he has, it'd be interesting to see where it goes from here.
And are we one of the first retail sort of sites in this case?
I believe it's the first retail store in Canada side.
In
Yeah.
Canada?
Yeah. So
That's
we'll
great.
see where it goes.
That's great news.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Avon.
Looking
Any other
forward to it.
comments for the proponent? Thank you. I'll close this portion of the meeting. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Templer. If someone would please put the, excuse me, the motion on the floor. Councillors Maracas and Tom, thank you. Speakers to the motion, please. Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Perry.
I'd just like to say that it seems like a very unique venture, and I'm happy to, that it's coming here. So looking forward to it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Gartner.
Thank you. I was trying to get some more specific information on Section 39 and 34 of the Planning Act. In the temporary use, which falls under the Planning Act, are there more specifics, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Muno? Are there more specific provisions? As far as I know, we've only discussed temporary use with respect to sales offices.
Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, I sent council late this afternoon the sections of Section 39 from the Act, and it's essentially, a couple lines as we've identified in our planning report. It's really a tool to permit temporary uses. It follows Section 34 of the zoning bylaw. It follows the same process as any zoning application, public planning meeting, and is really, in my experience, since I've been here with the town, I don't believe we've come forward with a temporary use, but I've done many of them in my past experience. Golf course, driving ranges, garden centers, outside storage, other type of uses, offices, in areas where, as Templer mentioned, there is a more comprehensive look at the ultimate planning for the area. As you mentioned, there is a master plan that they're undertaking for the balance of the Stronach property. So this is an appropriate tool to bring forward a temporary use. The limit is a 3-year limit, but that could be extended after that 3-year limit continually for 3-year periods.
Thank you. On page 3, under the Town of Aurora official plan, the last part says the temporary use, it says the applicant shall satisfy a list of criteria. What would those criteria be?
Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have that, the OP in front of me. I can maybe ask Lawrence to pull that out, but essentially the criteria that we're looking at are obviously ensuring that if services are required, any infrastructure are currently in the location at the lot line. In this instance, the lands are developed. There's an existing building. There's no new development happening. They're really going to accommodate the use within the one of the units within the existing multi-unit building. It's a butcher shop. The OP permits retail stores, and this is no different than the butcher shop or the meat market in any local grocery store.
Thank you. And last question on the same page 3. It says the existing vacant lands adjacent to the subject lands. Why are we concerned about the adjacent lands? It's at second paragraph from the bottom.
Mr. Muno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, I think that refers to Figure 3. We're just outlining the adjacent lands. So this property is designated business park. The lands, I think, immediately to the west are zoned mixed use. The balance of the Stronach lands on the south side of Wellington have either a business park, mixed use, or community commercial designation under our official plan.
So you're saying that the mixed use, a butcher shop use is in keeping with the surrounding land? The use of the surrounding land?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the official designation for the subject land is business park, which also permits mixed uses, which permits specifically retail stores. So the butcher shop would be a permitted use under the official plan.
Under business park?
Yes.
And this land, but this land itself is already business park, is it not?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, correct, but the official plan, the way it's structured, also permits mixed uses, the mixed uses as identified in OPA 30 within the business park designations.
Thank you. I'll speak to you after. I'm not sure why we're concerned with the vacant lands surrounding.
Any other comments? Okay, calling the vote. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? That's carried, Madam Clerk. Mr. Muno, could you introduce the second item, please?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. The second item is the official plan, zoning bylaw, and draft plan and subdivision application for Leslie Wellington Development, Inc. Lawrence will provide a overview of the application, and Angela Scaveras is the planning consultant for the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Staff would like to introduce the proposed draft plan of subdivision, official plan amendment, and zoning bylaw amendment on 1289 Wellington Street East. The proposed draft plan of subdivision is to subdivide the subject lands to permit 145 single detached lots with an environmental protection lands on municipal road and servicing. The related official plan and zoning bylaw amendment is to facilitate the draft plan. The subject land is located south of Wellington Street East in between Adina Meadows Way and Leslie Street. To the north are the townhouses that are currently under construction, the fire station and Stronach Aurora Recreation Complex. To the south is the condo residential development and the Adina Meadows private golf course, and the Magna headquarters to the west and vacant lands to the east. Previous planning approvals were given on portions of the subject lands. To explain this, planning staff would like to divide the subject lands into two, north of Touch Gold Lane and south of Touch Gold Lane. Start with south of the Touch Gold Lane. The Ontario Municipal Board approved a vacant land condo for 10 single detached lots with an implementing zoning bylaw R139 to reflect those uses. In 2012, council approved revisions to the plan to add 4 more single detached lots subject to a list of development conditions. To date, the landowner did not provide clearances to those conditions. As such, the lands south of Touch Gold Lanes can only build 10 single detached lots. On the north side of Touch Gold Lane, council approved a zoning bylaw subject to a site plan application. The proposal was to construct 4 multi-unit residential condo building for a total of 116 units with a sales and recreation center and a tennis court. However, the landowner did not complete the site plan application. As such, the zoning was never enacted, and the lands remain vacant today. Quick background, in 2015, the landowner went through the Committee of Adjustment to sever the subject lands from the larger land holdings. The subject application will be subject to applicable provincial, regional, and municipal policies. The subject land has a few official plan designation on it. Along Wellington Street is designated as medium-high density residential. Immediate adjacent is designated as low and medium residential with linear open space designation to the east. The proposed official plan is to amend the designation along Wellington Street East from medium-high density residential to low-medium density residential. Note that the applicant is not proposing to change the linear open space designation or the low, medium density residential. Here's a map to show what the designation will look like. As you can see that predominantly the lands is proposed to be designated as low, medium density. The existing zoning on the property is RU rural with R139 to reflect the approved 10 single detached condo lots, and the EP15 is to reflect the existing open space, heavy treed areas, and the watercourse along the east side of the property. The proposed zoning amendment is to change this existing zone to detached dwelling second density residential exception zone and environmental protection zone. A list of exception zones are listed in the staff report. Currently, the applicant is proposing 4 different R2 exception zones. Each exception zones will represent various frontages being proposed as shown. The proposed draft plan have the following characteristics. 145 single detached lots with frontages ranging from 11 to 18 meters, gross floor area of 232 square meters to 511 square meters. They range from 2 to 3 stories in height with a maximum of 12 meters. Full move signalized vehicular access is proposed. There's no access off of Adena Meadows, and all existing infrastructure will be removed to implement the proposed subdivision. So here's the proposed draft plan of subdivision, with the largest lots are adjacent to the golf course to the south. I'd like to note that there are reverse frontage lots on the east side of Street A, meaning that the rear yard will be backing onto Wellington Street East. And on the west side of Street A, they will either have side or front yard facing Wellington Street East. So the proposed application were circulated and have received the following preliminary comments: compatibility and appropriateness of the proposed development with the official plan and zoning bylaw. Outstanding technical studies includes Phase 2 environmental site assessment, environmental impact studies, hydrogeological assessment, and noise study. Park Services wants to see a vegetation management plan, compensation plans, and an interface plan along Wellington Street East to illustrate the landscape treatment along the reverse lots. Of course, Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority approval and servicing grading plans will need to be reviewed and detailed. The application will require peer review from an urban design point of view. The urban design peer reviewer will look at the architectural style and streetscape design. So after tonight's planning staff will take a technical review and provide a comprehensive report with the recommendation back to council for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. Ms. Suberis, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Angela Scabaris from Macaulay Shomi Housing. I'm here on behalf of the applicant and Treasure Hill Homes, who are will be the purchasers. They're under an agreement of purchase and sale with the Stronach Holdings. So as Lawrence has already identified the site, south of Wellington, there's Adena Meadows Way is a private gated road that accesses the estate condominium lots to the south as well as the golf course. There is a valley land feature to the east of our site that abuts the site. A portion of it is contained within our property, and a vacant land east of that. Just to put into context, for purposes of where Treasure Hill is in the town, I think you're probably all aware of their product. They have quite a few locations across the town, and this would be their one of the most recent ones. I won't spend too much time on the background. I think Lawrence gave a pretty good summary of sort of how we got to where we are today with respect to the property. The site has been improved by some site works. Touch Gold Lane is a paved road. There is lighting, tree planting, grading in terms of berming that were all completed and exist there today. So that would have to be removed in order to accommodate the proposed development. Treasure Hill is proposing to develop the site for 145 single-detached dwellings on public roads. A new access will be provided off of Wellington Street East and will be aligned, as Lawrence had said, with the road accessing the townhouses to the north. Lot frontages will range from 11 meters to 18.3, with the larger lots backing onto the Adino Meadows golf course. As I said, no public access to Adina Meadows Way will be provided, and it will remain a gated and secured entrance as it is today. Again, that's the proposed plan of subdivision. You can see the larger lots are a paler yellow to the south. The green to the east, which is the open space area, only a portion of those lands have actually been zoned as EP. And that is why our zoning application actually includes the zoning of additional environmental lands, mostly the ones that are up at the north end, the northeast corner adjacent to Wellington. These lots provide a transition of built form and density between the existing estate lots to the south and the lands that are developed to the north. As I said, the larger lots backing onto the golf course will have 3-car garages, and extra deep lots will be backing onto Adina Meadows Way in order to accommodate a storm water easement, storm sewer, which is currently draining from the pond at the golf course across the site to Wellington. So that is intended to be relocated, and it will be aligned along the rear of those westerly properties just to the east of Adina Meadow Way. So those lots have been created to be extra deep in order to accommodate that. As well, the lots on the east side of Street A, south of Wellington, are reverse lot frontage. And to that end, they have been also have been designed to be extra deep. They will include significant landscape berming, solid wood screen fencing, landscape treatment in order to enhance the streetscape, and I will show you some pictures of that shortly. Again, I won't, Lawrence has already gone through the official plan and the designations. So the lands to the north are designated, on the north side are designated medium high, and the south lands on the south side of Touch Gold are designated low medium. Both designations provide for a maximum permitted density. They do not have a minimum. So technically, the single detached could be developed within the medium high density residential, as it would be within the maximum range. However, the town's official plan has a policy which states the medium-high density shall include a range of predominantly above-grade housing forms. The low density, low-medium, states that it will be predominantly at-grade housing forms. So as a result, we needed an amendment to permit the single-detached dwellings within the medium, to be able to go within the area of the medium-high density. So that's the only change. The overall density of the site is actually going to be higher, notwithstanding that 4 apartment buildings had been proposed. The overall density will be going from 9.97 units per net hectare to a net density of 12.3. Again, Lawrence has gone over the zoning. So again, the zoning for the R139 was specific to the 10 estate lots, so we need to change the zoning for that to accommodate the new housing type. Just going through the zoning there. I don't want to repeat what has already been said. In terms of the site-specific zoning provisions that we are asking for, they are very typical to what already exists within the town, within new current developments. The town zoning bylaw provides 2 zoning categories for single detached dwellings, and they do not reflect what the current market is selling. So you will notice in your zoning bylaw there are over 90 exceptions to your single detached zoning categories, and the majority of them are to reflect the types of lot frontages that we are proposing. We have not created any new provisions. The provisions that we are proposing are ones that the town has already accepted in other locations, and in particular with the Treasure Hill development that was developed on Knights Creek, Bayview, and Stone Road. So very similar to that type of structure. In terms of urban design, architectural and urban design guidelines were prepared by John G. Williams Limited Architect, and that was in support of the town's approved architectural guidelines for the area. The key features that John has identified: high-quality building design and style reflecting upscale, heritage-inspired architectural theme, identification of priority lots, high-quality fencing and landscaping with focus on key visible areas, and he has identified within his report corner lots, the Wellington Street frontage, any of the lots that had a significant view within the area. So the proposed Wellington streetscape, the landscape architect for Treasure Hill was asked to look specifically at the reverse lots on the east side of Street A. And I know it's not very easy for you to see here, but he has provided for a variety of deciduous coniferous trees, ornamental plantings, grasses. There is berming that is proposed. They've also suggested a high-quality solid wood screen fencing, ornamental, so there will be some detail to it, and it will be accented with stonework. They've prepared, I'm not too happy that it doesn't show up very well on here. I'm hoping you can see it maybe a little better on your screens. He's prepared a really great streetscape here that gives you a really good idea of the detail that the landscape architect is looking at. You can see he's got landscaping stones at the intersection as an entry, and quite a number of trees and materials going along the Wellington Street frontage. I'd also like to point out that there are a number of existing coniferous trees along that frontage, very mature, very healthy, and beautiful. Notwithstanding, regardless of whether we did reverse lot frontages or not, those trees would all have to come out because of the grading that's required. So Treasure Hill is going to try to relocate as many of those trees within the property as they possibly can because they are quite nice. So just so you have an idea of housing type, what Treasure Hill is thinking of, these are some of their house elevations that have been used in other locations. And these all meet, they've been reviewed by the architect in terms of design and compliance with the urban design guidelines, and these all meet the requirements. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cabarrus. I'll just ask if there's any members of the public who have any comments on this particular application. Seeing none, I'll ask if any members of council have questions for the proponent. Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm just looking for parks. I don't see a park.
A park? Is that what you said?
Yes, I'm sorry. We're looking for a park.
A park.
Yes. I am, anyways.
That hasn't come up in conversation, and I'm not sure that the Parks Department has identified one required for the area,
Okay.
but we haven't received any comments back yet.
Okay.
I'm going to, with respect to your question, I'll just go to Mr. Muno, if I may.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Certainly. To you, Mr. Mayor, in our preliminary discussions with our Parks and Rec Department, they have not identified the need for a park here, so their comment or condition would be cash in lieu of parkland.
Thank you. And I see some natural on the east side, but that doesn't look like it's accessible. I mean, there's lots there's no path or anything going into there, so.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. Those lands would be conveyed to the town, the additional EPA lands. So there are lands that are within the zoned area already that are zoned but are within the Stronach holdings right now. And then there are additional EP lands that have not been included in the zoning that will be rezoned. And it's our understanding that all of those lands would be conveyed to the town.
Thank you, but, you know, we're a trails sort of community, and I envision along those EP lands, a trail or some access to public to enjoy the natural environment, and I don't see any access coming through on this site plan.
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, that those types of comments would come from the Parks Department, and if they had identified that it was part of their master trail system, then we would certainly have that discussion with them.
Okay. I wasn't specifically going along our master trails, but just trails anyways. It's nice to be able to access it. And this is just a preliminary site plan, because I'm looking at lot 92, and this is a bit off topic, but that's a wild lot.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you very much.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, that the configuration of that lot was really governed by the existing EP zone. So the balance of it that was not included within the EP zone is developable land. So it had to be tied to something. We tied it to that lot.
Other questions for the proponent? Excuse me. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You had mentioned that Adina Meadows will continue to be a gated community. So will this whole neighborhood be a gated community, or Street A, does that flow out into Wellington, or is that a dead-end street?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Adina Meadows is a private gated road right now. We do not have access to that, and our road will be Street A, a public road that comes off of Wellington. Yeah, so it will not be gated. Those will be public municipal roads
Okay. And,
within our subdivision.
Okay, thank you. And it's not that significant, but I noticed that the Treasure Hill homes on the just south of Stone Road and Bayview,
Yes.
the floor plan's kind of cut up. Will these be kind of open floor kind of set up, or will it be kind of cut up like the ones on Bayview and Stone Road?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can't comment on that. I can ask representatives from Treasure Hill if they want to respond to that. I'm not entirely sure that the exact models of the homes have been confirmed yet, but I know the elevation styles, but I don't know the internal floor design.
Thank you.
Other questions for the proponent? Councillor Gartner.
Thank you. Looking at the subdivision plan, I'm not sure if you can answer this, but Councillor Abel is referring to lot 92, also lot 93, 100. These are very small frontages, so these are the lots that will require these exception zones? Is that a question you can answer?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I can answer the question. That's not entirely correct. The lots have been identified by color in terms of the zone category that we have placed them in. So they're sort of standard zone categories, 11-meter frontages, 13-meter frontages, 15-meter frontages. So the color coding represents the zone category that we want to put them in. So the frontages for, I can't remember the lot numbers, but I know which ones you mean, that the corner ones and the ones up in the northeast corner, they meet the requirements for the same as the other lots in their same color category. So there are no single lots that have a specific exception. There is not one single lot that has a specific exception. I hope that's clear.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Just one quick question, Mr. Cabarrus. You said that the EP land, which is on the east side of your proposed development, and what color is that, Patty? Bright green. I don't do colors that well. That would be, deeded to the town?
That's my understanding, that the
Okay,
new...
but that does not include the land that would be between there and Leslie. That still remains property of the Stronachs. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. I will now close the public portion of the meeting, and if I could ask a member of council to put the motion on the floor, we'll discuss it. Councillor Peary, Councillor Tom? Comments or questions to the motion, please?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I did ask the applicant about parkland, so I'm curious. It's unusual for me to see a whole development without a single park or access to any trails, so I'm going to be watching or paying attention to that as it comes forward. That's my comment.
Just wanted to echo Councillor Abel's comment. I think you have 145 dwellings, so 145 families, and I'm just trying to figure out to myself, where is the closest park? I don't have the 2C map in front of myself, but essentially you're forcing them to cross the road to get to a park. There's nothing close by. So I just sort of echo that comment that, as we've seen with some of the neighborhoods in the 2B and 2C zone, they do come after a while, and they're looking for a neighborhood park. And so I think that it'd be better to have some consideration for that at this point in time.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't belabor that point because I was going to say the same things. I had a question to Mr. Amuno on page 20. What's a garage accessed over a flankage lot line? Can you explain that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and Lawrence can jump in to correct me, but I believe that is a provision that deals with a corner lot situation and the setback, 6-meter setback to the side yard. The other provision is the standard front yard setback to a garage is 6 meters. This refers to a corner lot having that side yard setback to the garage and likely to the main building as well.
Thank you, Mr. Amuno. My second question would be, although it's indicated in the chart, there isn't anything there, so I'm just confirming there's no side yard setback exceptions being asked for, is there?
Mr. Amuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you're following on page 8, that chart, the standard parent R2 zone identifies a 1.2 meter side yard, interior side yard, and for a single story, and a 1.5 meter side yard for a 2-story. The proposed exceptions for these lots, and we've heard they range from 11 meter frontage to 18 meters. What they're proposing are 1.2 meter side yards on one side and 0.6 meter on the other side, which is the typical setbacks that we've incorporated in our new communities, like 2B and 2C.
Thank you. I actually misread the chart, so that's slightly embarrassing, but thanks for the explanation anyways.
Other speakers, please. Councillor Maracas, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I won't go into about the park yet. I think it would be great to see one in there. But maybe, is there a chance through you, Mr. Ramuno, to have the Trails Committee look at that land that's going to be deeded to us and see if there's any way we could fit in a trail into that area?
Mr. Amuno?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. The application, I don't believe, has gone before the Trails Committee, but it will be scheduled to go to the Trails Committee before we bring it back to council. I've made notes, obviously. We will look at a couple of those issues, trails and parks. I do see that our current official plan, our trail plan, does identify a future trail in this general area. It's identified on the opposite side of the valley system, but as Angela mentioned and the plan shows, the environmental lands are being zoned right up to Wellington Street, so we would have, if those lands are conveyed to us, we would have access off of Wellington into that open space valley to the south.
Thank you, and that would be great if the committee can take a look at that and we can see what we can do. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. With respect to the chart on page 8, with the interior side yard, we have a one-story calculation. Do we have any are we building any one-stories in this? Any?
Mr. Muro?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, at this point, the applicant is proposing all two-story models. That one-story provision at 1.2 meters is a standard that's been in our bylaw for years.
So then we're really, really looking at the two-story. So the two-story is going from 1.5 to 0.6 meters. That's a pretty big change.
Mr. Muro?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's 1.2 meters on one side and 0.6 on the other side. So what that means is you add the two together. Between buildings, you'll have a minimum of 1.8 meters.
Thank you. On page 7, talking about the density, middle of the page, the comparison on page 7. In one case, the report talks about what is in place now and says the combined total density is 9.97 units per hectare. In the proposed draft plan, there's a talk about a net density and a gross density. So I'm trying to compare apples to apples. Is the 12.3 units per acre reflective of, I mean, why would one talk about net density and gross density and one just talk about total density?
Mr. Muro?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the simplest way to probably explain it is the previous approvals from council on the subject land between the 10 estate lots, large lots, and the previous 4 condo buildings tallied 116 units in the condo buildings and 10 lots. So what was previously approved on this parcel of about 30 acres was 120 units. This current proposal is showing 145 units. So it is an increase in density over what was previously approved by council.
Thank you, but thank you. What I'm trying to understand is, in one case, we're talking about 9.97 units per hectare, and then the comparison with the proposed draft plan is talking about a gross density of 12.3. So those aren't apples to apples. So how can we compare that? One's total density, one's gross density.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think if I'm reading those 2 paragraphs, the current 145 unit proposal works out to 12.3 units per hectare. The 9.97 units per hectare is what the density would have been if the previous developments were approved, being the 116 unit condo buildings and the 10 large lots. So there's an increase of 9.97 to 12.3 with this proposal.
And the 9.97 is the gross density?
I think that is the gross density based on those previous approvals, the 10 lots and the 116 apartment units.
So maybe you could just confirm that to me tomorrow. Sure. Thank you. The only other comment I have is when the previous council approved the condominium buildings, I remember a lot of angry people in the audience, and they were angry because they hadn't been notified. So we had a similar problem with Hunter's Glen, the Hunter's Glen application, because the homes are so far apart. A lot of people didn't get notified. So I think council should be interested to make sure that anybody who might be interested in this gets notified. I can't imagine that the residents on the other side of Wellington are going to be less happy with this than the condos, but I still think that we need to find a way to ensure that everybody, this I'm guessing is in the Planning Act, but it doesn't mean that we as a council can't say in areas where, for example, here, people are living across a major street, being Wellington, that's 5 lanes of road. So they're not going to get notification, and yet they are the closest neighbors. I think when it comes back to public planning, we should find a way to make sure those neighbors are notified. Thank you.
Councillor Perry, Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I get a confirmation from Mr. Ramuno? What exactly is the cash in lieu and parkland fee?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, if we impose a condition of cash in lieu of parkland, it's based on 5% of the value of the land at the building permit stage. So that's something that we have a council-approved policy. It's a condition, so that will be worked out. It's a condition of approval payable upon execution of the subdivision agreement before they start construction. The other alternative is if our Parks Department...
I was just looking at the fee, so
Okay.
that's okay, thank you. I appreciate the clarification on that. And through you to Mr. Ramuno again, roughly speaking, the way I'm looking at what we have in front of us, it appears to me that Street A is going to align with the street opposite Wellington. Could I get confirmation on that as well?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it will align with the Casings townhouse development currently under construction north of Wellington.
And to clarify again, Mr. Ramuno, what's the likelihood of a signalized intersection at that location?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, our discussions with the region to date, they've indicated that they have no objection to the intersection. They don't feel that a signalized intersection is warranted at this point, but sometime in the future, there may be a warrant and there may be a future intersection.
So in my view, you know, I think if we're talking about parkland and the lack of parkland, if we're going to have two streets that align, I don't think it's outlandish to think that there would be a signalized intersection at that location. At some point, based on the numbers, I would likely think it's going to be in the nearer future than in the longer term. Even though the counts at this point don't add up, I think looking at this, I have concern with safety in people making left-hand turns and right-hand turns at that location, at those locations. But I think if we're talking about the need for park, I think it's important to keep in mind that council's at this point choosing to move forward with the park on Mavernack, which is going to need some funding. And I don't think it's outlandish or unreasonable to think that people in this subdivision would travel to that park on that location to get some level of activity. And I wanted to remind council as well, there's a 200-acre nature reserve going in. Again, you know, if you look at the EP zones, it's right across the street from this site. So I think that's something to keep in mind and something to consider as we move forward on this. There have been sites in town where we have built subdivisions, small subdivisions that don't necessarily have a park included in them. Monkman Court is one that comes to mind. Again, there are sites nearby, but I don't believe that there's a park in that subdivision. So again, something to keep in mind. I think a park and parkland is easily accessible from this location. And on the whole, I don't have an issue with what's being proposed in front of us.
Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ramuno. The children in this new development, is it fair to say that they would be attending Hartman Public School across the street? And is there capacity there to meet this demand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a good question. I mean, that would likely be the nearest schools, the ones in 2B or the future schools to be built in 2C. We will, as part of our circulation, I don't believe we've received comments from these school boards yet, but we will definitely include those comments in a future report.
Okay. And lastly, through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Ramuno, in terms of the construction schedule, are we a couple of years away, or do you have a rough idea when this project will move forward?
Mr. Ramuno.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, depending on the, the timing of the approvals, the earliest this would come back would be the fall. It's really unlikely. Best case scenario, we're probably looking at servicing, very earliest the end of 2017.
Thank you.
Councillor Maracus, Councillor Thompson for the second time, and Councillor Gardner for the second time. Councillor Maracus? No. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regards, through you to Mr. Ramuno, with regards to density, we had a fair bit of conversation and around a different application last night, and we heard the proponent talk about the change in density from medium to low, and there's a fair bit of information within the report with regards to the fact that it is an increase in the overall net density on a per acre basis. But I just want to get confirmation from you that while there is an increase, it still doesn't exceed the I guess the expected or anticipated density for this area.
Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. It doesn't exceed the maximum density in this area, and I believe the maximum density in this area is maximum of 25 units per hectare. So it's still within the density provisions. It's below the maximum.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'm supportive of the recommendation to take this to General Committee and deal with it there.
Councillor Gardner, Councillor Abel.
Thank you. With respect to Parkland, I think because of where this subdivision is situated, across a major road from park, I think it does need to have a park. Mr. Minow, do we have a standard of parks to a certain number of residents? I mean, with respect to subdivisions specifically.
Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe we do a basic service level. I don't believe it's based on the number of units or minimum number of units, but it's certainly something I will address at a future report once we get comments back from our Parks Department, and we'll circulate the application to our Trails and Parks Committee.
Thank you. And I think the people in the Mavernack Park area, I think that park is going to be very well used as it is. I don't know about bringing extra people into that park, but I think it's something we need to consider. And the last question is with respect to servicing. I'm not sure this density was ever envisioned in our servicing plan. Do we have servicing available?
Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we do. We do have a certain amount of servicing allocation, and that is granted by council at the time of approval of either a subdivision application or a site plan application. So when we do come forward with a recommendation, there will be a standard recommendation to allocate X number of servicing capacity to a specific development. But we do have still a 3 or 4 year supply of servicing capacity in reserve.
Thank you. So this granting servicing here won't affect any of our planned subdivisions or our the amount we've set aside for our downtown core?
No, it won't, not in my opinion.
Thank you. That'll be in the report. Thank you.
Yes.
Councillor Abel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And previously, through you, we had estate homes plus condo units, and it seems to me that had area for parks. And I would like to know that, and if it was the case, why was there parks then? And now we've increased the density and now there is no park. So I'm just sort of wondering where the Parks and Rec came. I know I just wanted to make that point. We were talking about parks and trails. There's a neat little park at Murray and Kennedy on the northwest corner. And it's just a little wee corner on the floodplain. And the town put in a little horseshoe trail sort of path so the people can walk into it. So although it seems like a smaller sort of area, I think it goes with what we envision in our master plan here in Aurora. The 2 sea lands, we've got 42 kilometers of off-road there. So this is sort of why I'm placing a bit of an emphasis on this. I hope it's going to be addressed at General Committee, because that may be my biggest concern, whether I would go forward with this plan. So I know they're taking notes, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers, please? Councillor Maracas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to ask about the public that has been, has known about this. I'm just wondering, is it safe to assume that the board from Medina Meadows was consulted at some point, probably with this, considering the lands are pretty much, they were conveyed to them to be used within their gated community. So is it safe to assume that they were made aware of this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we've sent out our notices, ads in the paper, and I know that the applicant, Treasure Hill, has had discussions with the Medina Meadows board about their proposal, and they've seen the proposal.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. You've heard most of the issues, specifically with respect to parks, and Councillor Berry pointed out signalized intersections. So, and I know that that's up to the region, but we might be able to encourage the region to look at that sooner than later, perhaps. I think I'm very impressed with the looks of the application. Certainly, as we get closer to final plans, that will be exciting to see. Also, if you could make a note and talk to the developer about LID. I don't know if that's been mentioned at all or not, but that might be a way for them to pick up some extra land that could be used perhaps for parks or trails. So if they could look at that, that would be good. That may or may not work. I know that there's some ponds right in behind there with respect to the golf course, so I think it would be beneficial to look for that. If there's no other comments or questions, all in favor of the motion on the floor, please. Opposed? That's carried, Madam Clerk. If you could introduce our third item, Mr. Rose.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, Lawrence will provide the overview of this. Is the second time this application has been before council. Our first public meeting was back in January, and the direction from council was for the applicant to address some concerns raised, and as you'll hear, the applicant has revised their proposal, and Angela Scabaris, again, is the applicant for the Metropolitan Square proposal. Lawrence?
Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. The application at hand is an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment at 180, 190, 220 Wellington Street East. As Marco has indicated, the last time this application was heard in council was on January 27, 2016. The direction was to come back for another public planning meeting for discussion. So here are the following revisions that has been done by the applicant to date. The overall height has been reduced to 8 stories. The total number of units has been brought down to 207. A proposed road widening of 3.5 meter along the frontage of Industrial Parkway North. There is a right-in, right-out access intersection at Center Street and Industrial Parkway North. Also, the applicant has provided a commitment to provide a portion of the residential units for affordable housing. Quick refresh of the subject lands. This is the northeast corner of Wellington Street East and Industrial Parkway North. The proposed amendment, just a quick refresher once again, is to add a site-specific official plan policy to permit the maximum height of 8 stories now. The rezoning, it's still at the general industrial M2 zone to RA3 third density apartment residential. The list of exceptions in the staff report are still applicable. This plan just simply shows that the proposed official plan designation is not changing, but we're just adding a site-specific to reflect the height. The proposed zoning, it's once again, it's RA3 to reflect a residential apartment building, as it surrounds mostly commercial and industrial zoning. This conceptual landscape plan here shows that the overall site has not changed since the previous meeting from a landscaping perspective. However, as indicated, the height has been lowered, and there is a road widening on Industrial Parkway North, which this following plan is highlighted along the frontages there. The applicant have provided a few conceptual rendering of the sites, and here you can see that this is an 8-story schematic along Wellington Street. And here is another 8-story proposal along Industrial Parkway. So planning staff would like to take a moment just to go through some of the comments we received to date here. In general, there are no major concerns being identified. No major concerns from the development engineer or the park services. Servicing and grading information, vegetation management plan will be reviewed at the site plan stage. Infrastructure, environmental services concur with the peer reviewer, and they have no concern with addressing some of the details in site plan. IES department do require an updated transportation study to discuss about the proposed right-in access and the road widening. Also, Section 37 in regards to securing affordable housing in exchange for increased height, that is an item that planning staff will continue to work with the applicant on. The commitment of affordable housing will be in the form of agreements and register on title, and we will continue to use best practices approach to determine the number of units. From an external agency comments, no major concerns were identified. York Region District School Board indicated that there's no public elementary schools are required as a result of the residential units. Fire services, no objection with getting servicing here. And the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority are satisfied from a watershed management perspective. The proposed official plan amendment is also exempted by the region at this time. So from a peer reviewer's perspective, the transportation was peer reviewed. The proposed development was also circulated to planning partnership to peer review the urban design. So here's what they said. In general, the transportation was based on sound transportation engineering principle. It follows a logical progression and analysis. The only comment that the peer reviewer has pointed out was that to suggest an additional measure to alleviate any future potential congestion at the intersection of Center Street and Industrial Parkway North. And as a result, the applicant has came back with the right-in, right-out access. From an urban design perspective, the Planning Partnership Act appreciates the site being broken into 2 buildings to reduce the overall massing along Industrial Parkway North. They have no concern with the proposed setback requirements from an urban design point of view. They do appreciate the articulations and the materials being proposed, and they will continue to review the details at the site plan stage. We received a list of public comments from the last public planning meeting, concerns regarding the specifications being requested, traffic movements, the loss of businesses, the relationship with GO Train, the reduce the burden of existing storm water. There's also a few encouragement and suggestions to use more the LEED Silver standards and suggestion of providing an X percentage of the total units for affordable housing. Once again, after tonight, the comprehensive report with recommendation with options will be presented for council's consideration at a future general committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. Mr. Cabarrus.
Oh, thanks. Lawrence has probably addressed quite a number of my slides, so I'll try and go through them quickly. Site, everybody knows. Just a couple of the site photos to remind everyone what is there. The existing condo apartment building on the northwest corner. So what we heard, as Lawrence had indicated at the first council public meeting, height, mixed reaction, some concern over the 10 stories, that it was too aggressive. The proximity, setback of the buildings to the street, need for a future road widening on Industrial Parkway North, or at least to secure for it, general support for the building design, and support for provision of affordable units as a bonusing requirement under Section 37 of the Planning Act. From the departmental and agency comments, as Lawrence had said, York Region Planning has approved our exemption, said that it's in keeping with region and provincial policies, and is therefore considered a routine matter of local significance. No objection to the OPA from York Region Transportation, no objection from the Conservation Authority, same with Development Engineering, and Lawrence went through the transportation peer review comments. It was through those discussions, by the way, with the town's peer reviewer as well as your traffic staff, that the 3.5 meter widening was appropriate. That was their recommendation, although they had not done a full assessment. That they were the ones that requested it. That's where we got the number from. We didn't come up with it. The urban design peer review, again, they appreciated that the site was broken into the two buildings, providing articulation. They really liked the courtyard, the space between the two buildings, providing pedestrian and vehicular access. The footprint, they said, was in keeping with the large site building prototypes, which is one of the prototypes outlined in your architectural design guidelines, the Aurora Promenade. And they also indicated that they would encourage us to consider commercial uses at grade along Wellington. And I think I had indicated before that because of the grading of the site, we don't have any units that are at grade, so there would be either steps going up or steps going down, which would be very difficult for commercial uses. The building is set back within the required 2 to 4 meters, so we are within that range. And they asked for detailed drawings. They wanted to take another look at it when we submitted for site plan approval. So what has changed? The height's been reduced to 8 stories. The proposed future road widening of 3.5 meters on Industrial Parkway has been incorporated. There's been a reduction in the number of overall units. The official plan amendment is still required because we are asking for more than 6 stories. We've had discussions, we had follow-up discussions with Mr. Ramuno and preliminary discussions with York Region Housing Services. We were looking at approximately 10 rental units based on some other municipal methodologies for calculation, because the town doesn't have any policies in place yet. So that would be approximately 10 units. I say approximately because it's all related to the total number of units that get approved. So it's a ratio. But at the moment, based on the current proposal, it would be approximately 10. The south entrance, which is the entrance to that internal courtyard and 12 surface parking spaces, has been restricted to a right-in, right-out, as per the town peer review recommendation, and this would discourage any traffic from obviously making a left, which would aggravate the situation we understand that's at Center Street and Industrial, and avoid that conflict. Site statistics, you're not going to be able to read it all. Basically, there's one item up at the top that's highlighted, and it's the only thing that we do not comply with in terms of the town's requirements for the design guidelines, and that is your official plan policies, is the lot coverage. It requires a 50% lot coverage, and the change that's been made now drops us just under that, 49.5. But the lot coverage is a minimum of 50%. That obviously would be refined through the detailed design process, so I'm not worried about that, but I just wanted to draw that to your attention. Let's go through maybe a couple of those. So the changes, net changes that are outlined on the chart is 1.5% reduction in the lot coverage, which we will need to address. We are still within the build within zone that is required. The setbacks, building setbacks have not changed. Height has been reduced by 2 stories. The gross floor area has been reduced by approximately 4,500 square meters for the 2 buildings combined. There's a reduction of by 88 units, so we've gone from 296 down to 207. Parking has not changed. Parking, The percentage of parking on the surface has not changed, and everything is still, the balance is is below ground. We have 12 parking spaces on the surface, which is 3%, which we're allowed. Number of total parking spaces has been reduced by 25, 24 of which are resident. One visitor parking is less. Again, this just demonstrates those numbers in terms of the setbacks, the percentages within the built area, just to illustrate that we are still in compliance, and we're showing the road widening. We've also showed the right in, right out. It's not entirely correct in terms of its location, just so you know. It needs to be moved into the site, so it's not sitting in the town's right-of-way. The elevations, we've tried to keep it exactly the same because they were designed entirely based on the town's architectural design guidelines. They were peer-reviewed by Planning Partnership, who were very supportive of it. So we tried not to change the design as best as we could. It really was just a reduction in the height and some playing around with some of the floor space a little bit. For anyone that is actually counting the stories on the sketches, the building to the north, if you count from the very north side of the building, it comes up as 9 stories. And that is because the grade at that end of the site is very low, and the underground is basically at grade there. You drive in at grade into the underground. However, we are committing to 8 stories, and the town has its bylaw definition for what a story is, what a floor is, how the grade is measured, and so we are committed to complying with that. Just to put it into a little bit of perspective, the buildings north of the town hall, immediately north of you, that's a 5-story building. On the east side of John Westway is a 6-story building. So in this location, given that it's on an arterial road and a major collector, and it's across the street from the GO station, the additional 2 stories, and it's in surrounded by commercial uses, is appropriate. Again, as Lawrence said, the landscaping and everything will be the same. Before I get into the next steps, I just wanted to make a couple of points specifically with respect to the design. The additional height allows for significantly improved building design and built form. It allows for the articulation, it allows for the step backs. If we proposed a 5-story building and did not ask for the amendment, you would get basically a block building, as is across the street. We would not have to comply with some of the key design standards that are in the guidelines because it puts us into a different category. It also allows for the provision of affordable housing. You get that through our request. That's a bonusing, and that's something that we're committed to doing. It is supported by the region. It is an appropriate location, as I had indicated, because of its proximity to the GO station and commercial uses. And on a related note, and I'm not sure if council is aware of this, I attended today the province's technical briefing of coordinated review of the growth and greenbelt plans today. And one of the changes to the to the growth plan is to add a definition of major transit station area. The new growth plan will require an increase in people and jobs per hectare, in the case of Aurora for the GO station, to 150. And just to put that into perspective, that's 150 people and jobs per hectare. That's an increase from the current 40. And the major transit station area definition says, The area including and around any existing or planned higher order transit station or stop within a settlement area, or the area including and around a major bus depot in an urban area. Major transit station areas generally are defined as the area within an approximate 500-meter radius of a transit station representing about a 10-minute walk, which is exactly what we are. So I don't know, I haven't even had a chance to discuss this with Mr. Ramuno. I don't know how many people per unit this development would generate, but just based on the increase from 40 to 150 is absolutely huge. The province is committed to having their updated policy plans in place by the end of this year, and then municipalities are going to have to go through their conformity exercise all over again. So one of the additional policies contained within the new growth plan is prohibiting land uses and built form that would adversely affect the achievement of the minimum density targets that I had stated before. So they are actually going to prohibit municipalities from being able to develop lower scale or lower developments within these locations. And the municipalities are obligated to identify them. It's heavy-handed, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So next steps, we have not updated our traffic study yet because we wanted to have this public meeting and get additional comments. And then we will make all the revisions necessary, get the resubmission back in, and discuss any issues or comments that any of the departments or agencies have. Then we're hoping for approval of the OPA and the ZBA. We will be filing a formal submission for our site plan application and have that go through its technical review and comment. And then once the site plan is finalized, we will then obviously finalize the implementing zoning bylaw to reflect those plans and hopefully get that approved as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Cabarrus. That's kind of a scary news you just threw in there for us. There are no members of the public attending, so we'll just go to council. Comments or questions for Ms. Cabarrus with respect to this development, please? Councillor Gartner, Councillor Peary, Councillor Kim.
Thank you. The only thing I hadn't seen in the report was conversations about at-floor retail. So I'm happy that was addressed in the presentation. It's not what I'd like to hear, but I understand where you're coming from, so I appreciate the rationale that was provided, and I can't win all the battles, but you know, I am happy to see that you know, we're stepping back to ensure that the massing isn't too overwhelming for street grade. So thank you.
Councillor Gartner, Councillor Kim.
Thank you. You mentioned the 10 rental units. I kind of got lost there. Are those the proposed affordable housing units?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Cabarrus, for presenting. The road widening, so will that extend only to along the length of the development, or will that go any further?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're only able to convey lands that are under our ownership, so it would be simply across the frontage of our property on the Industrial Parkway side. That's
okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, to Ms. Cabarrus, in terms of sidewalks, will there be room to have some sidewalks on the east side of Industrial Parkway? At the very least, along, adjacent to the development, or no?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the town would certainly expect us to provide for a sidewalk. I believe there's a sidewalk there now. It would just be improved. It would be relocated to accommodate for the 3.5-meter widening, and it would meet whatever the town standards are.
Okay. And just lastly, I don't want to be picky about it, but I find that I always miss out on the part where we get to put our input on the design and the aesthetics of the buildings and the homes. And I find that despite the fact that, Aurora has, we like to think it's, Aurora is a brand in itself, and we like to think that we're a certain type of community, and yet sometimes our buildings and our homes don't quite reflect that. And it's hard to tell from the slides, the external facade, but if you can ensure that, it'd be nice to have a little bit of stone or just something that's kind of timeless as opposed to a building that's going to be dated after 5 to 7 years. So if there's any way between now and the GC to kind of add, some certain features, whether it be, glass features to reflect some kind of modern component to, some Georgian style with stone, or just something along the base or something to kind of upgrade it, because it is Aurora after all, that'd be great. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Mr. Ramuno to speak to some of the outside design consultants we go to. That's a process you may not be familiar with.
Certainly. To you, Mr. Mayor, as we mentioned, the author of the promenade plan and our official plan was a planning partnership, and they've also been retained as our control architect for any future proposals within the promenade. So you've heard that we've sent these conceptual proposals, designs, to the planning partnership for their initial input. And as we've outlined and you've heard, they're satisfied with the overall design, the placement, the massing, how it steps back, it's articulated. We haven't gotten, or we haven't seen actual details with respect to materials, but when, as Angela mentioned, our next step is to submit a formal site plan application, which will actually detail the materials and really get into specifics. We will then run that by a planning partnership as well. Council will certainly have an opportunity to see that, and will eventually, council will have to give their approval of a future site plan application where we will detail the design, architectural elements, materials, etc. So that's my commitment to council has always been any developments that are approved will be of high quality design to stand the test of time.
And just to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about is, when you go to King City area and you see some of the new home developments there, you immediately feel that you're kind of in a more upscale neighborhood. Or parts of Markham, some of their condos, they look like little kind of French chateaus with those little nice chimney thingies and all that kind of stuff. But we don't have that here, and I'm just wondering why do we get the, no offense to anybody, but it's just, it'd be nice to have a little bit more character in some of the buildings in Aurora.
I'd like to call a question of privilege. I think Councillor Kim is saying that my residence is not aesthetically pleasing, and I do take personal offense to that.
We'll take that up later, okay? Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. Going back to the affordable housing, are these units going to fit the policy that York Region has for affordable rental housing?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we did have a preliminary meeting with the director, I believe, at York Region Housing Services, and he outlined for us the process, the requirements, and yes, everything would be done through them. So it would have to meet their requirements for, it would be an agreement through them, it would be formalized through them.
I'm going to go to Mr. Ramuno on that.
Thank you.
Certainly, to you, Mr. Mayor, I can add, I have had a discussion with the applicant. Following the January public meeting, there was discussion and the commitment by the applicant to provide affordable housing as part of the bonusing, if council would approve the additional density and heights. I'll have to give credit to the mayor. He actually scheduled a meet or set up a meeting with Mr. Rick Farrell, the general manager of York Region Housing Services. So I did sit down with him one-on-one, and then I did have a meeting with him and the applicant and Ms. Cabarrus to discuss the potential, if council were to proceed with the an approval of additional height. They are more than willing to enter into a lease agreement with the applicant to provide affordable housing units. What that really means is, I know Angela's mentioned 10 units. The number of units would really be a function of, whatever extra units or density council approves. But if it is a number, say 10, the region would become the landlord and enter into a lease agreement, 20-year lease agreement with the proponent, and they would ensure that those 10 units would be spread throughout the two buildings, and they would ensure that those units are provided to York Region residents that are currently on the waiting list with York Region Housing. The asset, the unit, would be still maintained by the proponent in ownership. However, York Region would operate those units as part of their housing inventory. So it would be a benefit to York Region residents and also to the town that we would have additional number of units that would be operated by York Region Housing.
Councillor?
Thank you. Good to hear. I think the waiting list right now is 7 or 8 years. 10 units isn't going to make a big difference, but it's something.
Councillor Abel?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So I was wondering if there are any entry-level units, and that's what I call like affordable. We have to get as we move through, we have to sort of get our terms. Often when I say affordable, I mean entry-level, so like my children could say, you know what, we can put in and we'll live modestly and we'll take a smaller unit, and gee whiz, they're not 800,000. We had a development north of yours, Bayview and St. John's, and they were selling a few years ago for 250,000. Very small units, I think 800, 900 square feet. That's what I mean by affordable. But I think what we're talking about is are units through the social assistance through the York Region. And I applaud that as well. So there's a difference. Often when people hear the word affordable, they gasp and they're like, oh no, we don't want that sort of situation here. But I think it's very important that what you've done is very good, and I appreciate that. But I also wondered if there are going to be a scale where we can get some people that would like to purchase units a little smaller so that they can enter into the market in Aurora, because right now it's really tough. You got to move up to Aurelia or beyond to get something in that price range. So that's my point. I would bonus you as well for moving along those lines. I think that's important as well as the ones that are social assistance. And
I
Mr. Mayor.
apologize, Councillor. You did have on your slide what there was a series of 1 plus 10, 2 plus 10, 3.
Yes, we do have a breakdown, and there are.
It's not in our report. Could you back up in the presentation, perchance?
Yeah. There are, well, with the revised concept, we have 16 one-bedroom, 79 one-bedroom plus den, 56 two-bedroom, 56 two-bedroom plus den, no three-bedroom and three-bedroom plus den. So they are weighted on the smaller.
And that's great, because that's
Side.
probably going to be our entry level commuting and getting the amenities that our community offers. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the proponent, I'm just wondering how many, do you have a number of how many units per floor?
I do, but I don't have it with me. It's on I didn't bring the drawing, it's on my site stats. I can certainly send that to you, but I don't know, Lawrence, if you have a copy of that.
It'd be about 10?
Handy.
And the only reason I ask is because if we're bonusing 2 stories, well, in essence, we're bonusing 4 stories, because 2 stories per building. I'm just wondering how many units we're actually approving. And that's just my
I'm sorry,
question.
your point?
So are we looking at roughly about 40 units extra?
Mr. Moon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I mean, that's something that we will have to finalize. Just to clarify, though, you're correct. I mean, if we go from 6 to 8, you're essentially, we can look at it that way, that we're bonusing 2 stories. It's still a question of, for all intents and purposes, even though it's 2 buildings separated by, joined by podium, it's really, and it's something we can have further discussions on as to it's considered one building or two buildings, but we will provide that additional information once we get further details on the floor, number of units per floor as to what the bonusing would, how we would arrive at what would be bonused from 6 to if the final number is 8.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Ms. Cabarrus? Thank you, Ms. Cabarrus.
Thank you.
If someone would please put the motion on the floor. Councillor Perry, thank you. Councillor Kim, speakers to the motion, please. Councillor Dahl.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. My question kind of dovetails a little bit with what Councillor Maracas just brought up. At the previous public planning meeting, we had a chart on the reports that indicated what they're asking for in terms of amendments or exceptions or whatever you want to call them. One of them was going from 1 building to 2, and then from 5 stories to 10. So now we have 2 buildings that are 8 stories each. My question is, with respect to affordable housing, if that's what we're going to use in terms of bonusing, we're going to bonus extra height, and in return we're going to get affordable housing, and that based on the plan in front of us, we're going to get about 10 units. My question is, Councillor Maracas just touched on it. He's mentioned that we're actually, in effect, bonusing 2 floors for 2 buildings, so it's actually 4 floors. But if you actually really think about it, we're bonusing a whole other building. So we're almost bonusing 10 floors, because we're bonusing 2 plus the 8 of the X building. So I just want to know if that factors in. We're given an exception for an entire new building when there's only 1 allowed. So how does that not factor into bonusing, and it's just height? Can you explain if it's just height that factors into bonusing, or if an entire other building factors into bonusing as well?
Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just with respect to the bylaw provision, zoning bylaw provision that says 1 building per lot, and that's in our current zoning bylaw. What's also important to keep in mind is a design, and we've heard from our control architect that the preference is to break this up into 2 towers on a common podium, because if you didn't do that, you would have one big massive block of an apartment building, and it wouldn't be as aesthetic, and you wouldn't have the same architectural details. But I will provide additional information. We have in our official plan policies that permit density bonusing. What we haven't done yet is provided a set of guidelines with respect to how we're going to arrive at the ultimate value for the bonusing. So that's something that we'll have to spell out for council. And it's really going to be a function of if it's from 6 to 8. The other way to do it is obviously the amount of gross floor area that is being bonused based on a specific development. So it's additional information that we need to put together and provide to council before, before we provide a recommendation.
Thank you. I mean, I just wanted to point that out. We're actually being quite generous if this goes through with how much the leeway we're kind of granting. Now, I understand, I appreciate the density and the provincial policies and intensification and everything else. So I just wanted to bring that up. And perhaps for the general committee report, because to me, 10 units in this entire building seems a bit thin for affordable housing based on the amount that we're actually proposed to give exception to. And so those are my comments. Oh, the other question I had, so in the report, and this might just be semantics, and to be honest, you can just maybe email this to me if no one else is interested, but on page 33, for instance, they talk about the internal agency comments, and there's 2 phrases that are used: no concerns and no major concerns. What's the difference? I mean, if there's no major concerns, is there minor concerns that aren't listed? And you don't have to get into them. I'm just saying, sometimes it says there is no concerns, and sometimes there's no major concerns. So, I mean, as a councillor, if there's some concerns, I'd maybe like to know them, but again, you don't have to get into the details, and perhaps if you just want to give me an email or later on just explain to me why that is, it would be helpful, and you can copy council if you want.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at it, same thought, Councillor Tom. I think 10 is a little thin for myself if we're going to bonus it. To me, it's like I said, when we spoke about the density yesterday, and looking at this one today, height and bonusing is something, if there's a benefit to the community, I have no problems making that amendment and allowing that bonus, but that 10 is a little bit weak for me. And we heard about the, proposed legislation changes when it talks to the growth plan. And we have to remember, those are proposed changes. They haven't been implemented. So, it's great to hear about them, and I understand there's going to be the intensification targets could move to 60%, but could happen. It hasn't happened. If we look at, if we want to look at proposed legislation, we can also look at, Bill 204, the Promoting Affordable Housing Act, and its proposed legislation for inclusionary zoning, which would help achieve, more affordable housing to serve low to moderate income families and individuals, and it would allow the municipalities to require private sector developers to include affordable housing units in their development proposals. So, if we want to look at proposed legislation, we can look at that and say, hey, you know what, we can do a little bit more. And I know that some are going to say that hasn't come in yet, but if we're going to look at that growth plan proposed legislation, we can look at this one also. Just, some thoughts to think about. I have no issues moving forward right now at this point, as long as the affordable housing aspect is addressed. If I don't see a big enough improvement in my eyes, well then I'd have to change the way I vote when this comes before us at General Committee.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. I'm not a mathematician, but if you're going to go, is the height restriction 5? Is that what's in this area? 5 stories?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the height restriction in this area, General Promenade, is 5 plus 1 bonusing.
The plus 1 is for bonusing. So according to my math, we would be allowing 13 apartments per floor times 2 buildings is 26. That's 52 units. If we're thinking about the 3rd story, 6, 7, and 8, that comes to 78 units. That's not an exact calculation because the lot coverage is supposed to be 50%, and this lot coverage is 35%. But it's complicated. We should have these details straight before we go forward. The other thing is, this kind of massing wasn't envisioned. Do we have servicing again for this?
Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, as I mentioned, we've got a 3 to 4 year supply. We've got a 5,000 persons equivalent supply of servicing capacity throughout the town, and 1,000 persons reserved for our intensification area.
Thank you.
Councillor?
I have 3 issues. It's showing just a building. I'm sure there's going to be trees, but because of the massing of this building, there would have to be substantial landscaping, I would think. The second concern is there is a dump site, I believe, on the site of this building. So, well, I've heard that. So
There's a what?
there was a dump site.
What kind of dump site?
I don't know, but we should find out if that's the truth or not.
Well, you're making the statement. I think you should perhaps follow it up with something.
Well, I did hear it through a provincial information source. So it's something we should look into. The other thing I heard I heard also is that St. Max at one point was willing for X amount of money to allow this land to connect to their road. Well, and if that's not true, that's something that should be explored because this is bordering on St. Max to the north. It's bordering on their road, and it's got a stoplight on that road. The planner is saying no. The other thing is...
Just a second, Councillor. Mr. Moon, I don't think it is bordering on their road, is it?
I could be
Because there's
wrong with that.
a storage unit in the middle, or a storage business.
Correct. Through you, Mr. Mayor, on page 37, our location map, No, the property immediately to the north is the storage unit property, and then the access to St. Max is further north of that. And St. Max, as we know, is east of the commercial plaza, the Nino's Bakery. So this subject land doesn't border the school property or the school access road.
Thank you. That's a shame. That would have been an easy answer. Looking at page 13, it looks to me like there's only one entrance exit on Industrial Parkway. That's true. Where is the second one?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, on the conceptual plan, yes, the main entrance is opposite Center Street. Then I believe there's further to the north, at the north end, there's another proposed access.
So the one, thank you, the one across from Center is the right in, right out?
Yes, that's the main access into the courtyard of the proposed site.
So if somebody was to go right out, how would they, where would they go? Would they to, I mean, it just sounds like it's going to cause problems because people who will make the right-hand turn out may want to actually be going south, so they're going to try and find a way to turn around. I see that as a big traffic problem, potentially a safety problem. Is that access to the north an emergency exit, or is that a full-use access?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, my understanding at this point, that's a full move access. And again, in our follow-up report, we will provide confirmation of the number of access locations based on, the peer review and our own traffic staff with respect to the site plan.
Thank you, because that may solve the problem of the right in, right out. And also, Councilor Maracas mentioned this last time. I have looked at it. This property owner, I believe, is also the property owner to the east. And grade was mentioned as an obstacle, but we've managed to connect the Longos Plaza with the plaza to the north of that. There's quite a grade there. So maybe it might be, it might be something to look at, to have that as an access. I don't know if York Region would let us signalize that, but there's a lot of problems already with that plaza. But I do think it's, and perhaps Councilor Maracas will further address it, but that's something that we shouldn't ignore.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Just in general, some of the comments, I always look at these public planning meetings as an opportunity for all members of council to share their thoughts on the application, but also to provide some guidance or direction to both staff and the applicant on what, how to address these issues and arrive at a plan that would be acceptable to all. And so there's just a couple comments I want to touch upon one is I've heard a number of comments with regards to 2 buildings versus 1 building. So at the end of the day, the proponent's in front of us for 200 units. And so they can do it as one massive building of 200 units, or they can do it as 2 separate ones. Staff have advocated that from an aesthetic perspective, that the look is better with 2. But I think that, council, all members, should give some clear direction to both staff and the proponent, whether they'd like to see those 200 units as one massive building or 2 separate ones if we're going to move forward. And the second really around is affordable housing. The way I see it, they've allocated 5% to affordable housing. If that's not the sufficient number to members of council, again, I think we should be giving direction. Do you want to see 10%? Do you want to see 15%? What is it? So that we don't get into a situation where the proponent comes back with some changes, and again, they're not exactly what people wanted specifically. So if there is an issue, let's try and identify it this evening and give specific direction. Personally, I'd rather see the 2 buildings with the podium as suggested by staff than one massive building with 200 units. That's my own preference. And so I think that if there are those concerns, let's get them out now and give that direction to staff.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you to Mr. Ramuno, I guess my question was, where did the 5% come from? We heard that that's standard procedure, but where did it come from? And
Mr. Ramuno?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. The 5% identified in our report was just a comment we heard from the public. The 10 units that Ms. Scabaris mentioned is really just is her number. I haven't arrived at a number yet. Again, and sorry for the confusion, but I will be preparing a report or even a separate report on a guidelines for how we arrive at density bonusing and land values in order to determine the appropriate number of units or contribution per that density bonusing. So that will come to this council before there is a recommendation report on this application.
And so just to be clear, what you're going to be coming back to council with is a policy that we can then apply to applications as we move forward, so that we're not looking at them on an ad hoc basis based the way we're feeling any given night, but there's going to be a policy in place to guide us to make sure that we're applying the same rules across the board.
Through you, Mr. Mayor,
Excuse
yes,
me, Mr.
that's correct. We're looking at best practices, and the one municipality in the region that has put together a set of guidelines is the City of Vaughan, and we're going to use that as our guide in developing our own set of guidelines for council.
So I think it's fair that if Mr. Raguno has told us that that policy and that report will be coming back to us prior to this moving forward, we'll have the ability to look at best practices then for me to give my 2 cents on what I think is right without having looked at best practices. I don't think would be, I think it would be a gut reaction at this point in time, and I'd rather have all the information in front of me before I make a decision. So thank you, Mr. Ramuno.
Councillor Gartner, second time.
Thank you. And further to Councillor Thompson's comments, I would definitely like to see 2 buildings. I like the idea of something pretty in that interior area between the 2 buildings. I'm really not in favor of bonusing 3 floors. I think the massing is going to be it's really going to stick out, and maybe in future that's what the buildings are going to be like. But there does need to be significant landscaping, and I also think for 3 extra stories on 2 buildings, we should be asking for some parking that could be used for the GO commuters. I think that needs to be taken very seriously. We need to look at this. If we're looking at it, as Councillor Thompson always does, in reality, in the future, to me, it's going to be a nightmare traffic-wise, and our GO parking situation is already a nightmare. So I think that those need to be, one definitely needs to be addressed, which is the traffic congestion. This will create onto industrial and Wellington, perhaps. And the second is providing some parking for GO commuters. And, of course, the affordable housing.
Any other speakers, please? I will, just a couple of comments. I agree with Councillor Thompson's point of view, and Councillor Gartner just stated as well that 2 buildings I think would look much better than 1 because it spreads it out, and I finally worked out the fact that articulation means you step back the stories. So I thought articulation was moving. So I appreciate that. The affordable housing, we've been working with the proponent and with Housing New York Inc. So this is still a work in progress, but as far as I know, this is the first time we've actually managed to get anybody to incorporate affordable housing. So I think we should also be thanking the proponent for even working with us on that. It's much better to work with people and get wins as opposed to force them into it. So we certainly appreciate them moving forward on that. Councillor Peary mentioned ground floor commercial, and as a discussion that we've had on and off a couple of times, and if you look at the building that's right across the road to the immediate west of it, has had serious issue with the ground floor commercial in that building not lasting very long. So I'm not sure that, I appreciate your point, Councillor, but I'm not sure that ground floor commercial doesn't seem to be a viable option in many of those areas. So I think it's probably something that the proponent can take back and look at whether or not they may be able to incorporate. But it doesn't seem to be horribly beneficial, or not beneficial, pardon me, but it doesn't seem to be horribly viable.
Just to clarify, Mr. Mayor, I never said, I stated that I understood the rationale, and it was something I was looking for earlier, but I understand the rationale.
Okay, all right.
So I'll move away from that now.
I misunderstood that. Thank you. Councillor Maracus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Along the lines of Councillor Thompson, we said, I mean, I definitely prefer 2 buildings over one big massive building. So that's, you know, for sure, 100%. I just, you know, I feel that if I'm going to move forward with allowing pretty much the tallest building in Aurora, you know, I think the community needs to get something out of it. And while I appreciate that, you know, we're working towards it, and I think that's great. 10 units is more than we've received from anyone else, and you know, I'd still like to see a